Hello and welcome to Nxt Lvl Data. As mentioned in our introduction video, Nxt Lvl Data is here to enhance professional baseball players by a data-driven approach to in-game strategy. We're glad you're here because even if you don't play baseball, there's still a lot to take away from these videos, no matter what your background is. Always feel free to leave your questions in the comment section as I'll do my best to answer them. Now for our first video, we're going to break down a former top 100 prospect who is an up-and-coming right-handed pitcher for the Seattle Mariners.
One game in the first as the 2-2 comes home, and Bellinger.
The 0-2 to Rendon.
Justin Dunn was drafted in 2016, taken with the 19th overall pick by the New York Mets. Some of you may remember he was traded to the Mariners in the Robinson Cano trade back in 2018. Dunn was on the MLB's top 100 prospect list both in 2018 and 2019 and made his major league debut in September of 2019. In his first year, Dunn was on a very tight leash from the Mariners as none of his 4 starts went past 2 innings despite him allowing 0 runs in 3 of those 4 starts. When the 2020 season finally began, Dunn was in the Mariners rotation and started 10 games throughout the shortened season. Like the majority of young players that come up to the big leagues, Dunn had very encouraging flashes of ability but also struggled at times. Let's dive into what Justin's repertoire has looked like as a big leaguer so we can further evaluate him. Dunn featured 4 pitches in 2020. A 4-seam fastball, a curveball, a slider, and a changeup. Here's how often Dunn threw his pitches to both right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters. And next, we'll see a velocity and spin rate average. You'll see here that Dunn's repertoire is pretty straightforward, and nothing really sticks out. If you aren't familiar with spin rates, then here are the MLB average spin rates for these 4 pitches. As you can see, Dunn is right around average for all 4 of his pitches, so let's dive into each one to learn more about it. First, I want to look at Dunn's 4-seam fastball. Here we have a pitch metric description of what Dunn's 4-seamer looks like based on a few things. I want to specifically look at the active spin of his 4-seamer. For those who don't know, active spin is a spin that directly contributes to the movement of the pitch. To give an example, a pitch that is thrown with 100% pure backspin has an active spin percentage of 100. We see here that Dunn averages around 91% active spin on his fastball, which is not bad. Dunn also currently averages around negative 16 inches of vertical break, which directly correlates to active spin. If he can increase his active spin to even around 95%, he could see his vertical break decrease by another inch or 2, which in essence would mean the pitch gets on the hitter quicker, so to speak, helping his fastball look harder than it actually is. This is something that will help Dunn over the course of a 30-start season, even if it is incremental. One thing I also wanted to point out before we move on is Dunn's 4-seam peripheral stats. Dunn's actual results versus his expected results based off purely batted ball data didn't line up in 2020. This shows that Dunn could expect the pitch to have more damage done upon it in 2021 if he uses it in similar fashion. We see here the batting average, slugging percentage, and weighted on base average of Dunn's fastball, which are all very favorable numbers. But when examining the expected batting average, expected slugging, and expected WOBA, marked with an X in front of it, we see a different story. Normally, teams put more emphasis on these underlying numbers than the actual numbers because it takes out unbiased errors and tells a truer story. I believe Dunn's fastball will yield better results as he uses his secondary pitches more, so let's look at them. Dunn throws a curveball and a slider for his breaking pitches. Both of Dunn's breaking pitches heavily imitate one another. From velocity and spin to active spin and movement, they're very close for 2 different pitches. We see here only a 3.4 mile per hour differential between the 2. In addition, they have almost identical inches of vertical break. My suggestion would be to separate these pitches in some form or fashion. We see here the batted ball results of both breaking pitches. Dunn's slider seemed to be his best pitch in 2020, while his curveball got hit pretty hard. Although this does not mean the curveball isn't a quality pitch, it does point to the idea that it would be in Dunn's best interest to separate the 2 pitches more in order to let both thrive. The question is, how does he separate the 2? Well, there are multiple ways that he can go about this. A velocity separation may be the most obvious, but Dunn could also see more favorable results from creating separation in some other way, such as a bigger difference in horizontal and vertical movement, or maybe even in what count he throws each pitch. This decision in how to attack a change is ultimately in the hands of the Mariners player development department, but I think there is no question that Dunn would benefit greatly from adding more distinction to his breaking pitches. Now let's move on to Dunn's last secondary pitch. Dunn only threw his changeup 6% of the time in 2020 and got less than desirable results. Dunn almost exclusively used his changeup against left-handed hitters in order to have a pitch that moved away from lefties, with it being thrown to them 80% of the time it was used. When breaking down Dunn's changeup, the first metric that caught my eye was the velocity. Dunn averaged 87 miles per hour on his changeups in 2020, which is only 4 miles per hour less than his fastball average. To give context, let's look at Mike Clevenger, who featured an ideal velocity differential between his fastball and changeup. We see that Clevenger's changeup averages 87 miles per hour as well, but his fastball averages 95 miles per hour compared to Dunn's 91. Ideally, you would want anywhere from 7 to 9 miles per hour difference between your fastball and changeup. So if Dunn can create this, I think it would be a more useful pitch and give him a true weapon against left-handed hitters. Dunn and the Mariners may choose to address this in a plethora of ways. One may be a grip change, or even possibly a small mental or physical cue that decreases velocity. I might also add that Dunn features below average vertical and horizontal movement on his changeup, so therefore it is that much more crucial for there to be an appropriate velocity difference. Now let's summarize some of the things we talked about so we have a clear idea of what we want to emphasize for Dunn in 2021. Number 1, the ability to differentiate between his slider and curveball. It's easier said than done, but separation between these two pitches could pay huge dividends for Dunn. He will almost certainly see better results, especially for his curveball, and also it may allow his fastball to play up by keeping hitters more off balance. This leads me to my next point, fastball shape. If Dunn can create more vertical break through increasing his spin efficiency, or active spin, he could not only see his fastball benefit greatly, but also his breaking pitches, which both have a vertical shape as well. Number 3, changeup velocity differential. As mentioned earlier, Dunn would benefit greatly from a changeup with more difference in velocity from his fastball. If Dunn is able to do this, I believe he can have an effective 4-pitch mix to attack hitters with. We can spend all day breaking down what Dunn does well and what he can improve upon, but I believe these 3 points are crucial to his development as a big leaguer. I've always been a fan of Justin Dunn, and am excited to see him hopefully establish himself as a big league starter in 2021. The best of luck to him and the Mariners this season. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Also, feel free to follow us on our other social medias at Nxt Lvl Data. Thanks for watching.